Yeah, I think that should be good. We had a couple of other people flow in. Again, if you just joined us, the agenda is in the voice chat, so feel free to open that up and check it out. Always, we will kind of go ahead and kick things off with the recent events news, move into kind of our open floor, more overall discussion, and then we can kind of end things with the initiative and collaboration discussion component. I will say that these times that are posted here are kind of flexible today. I think I'm going to have this probably be a little bit shorter one just because I have some other initiatives I'm going to be trying to kind of push through today. But as always, feel free to interrupt, but I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. So one thing that is kind of in the recent event news that we've discussed last week was, the bank core situation. I know we've discussed this previously, so I won't get into that fully today, but there's some information embedded in the link within that text there for anybody to check out who's not aware of that. But in light of that, I will be posting a proposal to basically withdraw our funds from the Bancorp position, just because, again, the spirit of risk mitigation in this crazy world is probably a good move to do. Kind of along the same lines of risk mitigation. So we've discussed our scenario with Maple Finance. Obviously, there's nothing in particular that we're necessarily worried about, but just because they're under collateralized, they have a little bit more potential credit risk. We have gone ahead and posted a proposal which has passed, I think, almost unanimously. I think there was just one person who voted against it. But basically to continue with the withdrawal of those funds from that position and any subsequent earnings from it as well. So I believe that passed the other day, and so we have gone ahead and initiated that. I think that on the 12th, the 13th, we will be able to hopefully withdraw the funds. It's going to be dependent on how much has been repaid to those pools in that time frame. So we did our best, the Treasury team, to analyze, what's the best chances of getting some success from our withdrawal based off of the repayment schedule. And, we have some other things in the works to hopefully maximize our probability of success there. So just know that those funds, it's about 3.5, a little over 3.5 million USDC that's in that position, as well as, I'd say anywhere between $60,000 to $100,000 in Maple rewards. So another position that we are just going to be closing, hopefully soon, as soon as possible, to mitigate as much risk as possible. So really the only recent events news, again, I try to keep it light today, deliberately, but does anybody else have anything that they've seen in the space or just, that may pertain to what we're doing that they'd like to talk about?
I did just want to point out that the Wonderland Sifu investment was approved by like 89%. If people hadn't seen what that was, I believe Wonderland is throwing $25 million at Sifu to let him manage some amount of funds.
Only in crypto.
Only here.
Oh. That's good ad.
That's crazy. There was a lot of FUD circling around him back in November, and people didn't want him near the project at all. So,
I guess people like to prioritize just growing the size of the treasury, but not something we'll be doing here anytime soon. At least in my opinion. I hope we don't. But so that's a good ad. Did anybody else have anything that around the crypto Twitter world or just anywhere else in general that they'd like to discuss here from a news perspective? Okay. Moving on to the open floor section. As always, if you have a protocol or treasury dashboard or just really anything that you'd like to see to gain further real-time insight, we can have our master stubs go ahead and create that. So feel free to use that link there. One other thing I just wanted to ask, and I think I know the answer, but Starfire has been working through this optimism proposal where we will hopefully be applying to receive some funding from them because they're basically trying to spur activity on there, and so I think we could be well aligned there. So we've started the process of writing a proposal, and right now we were just going to kind of verify what we believe is. Does anyone have any insight about optimism? Like, you don't need to set up a separate address for that. Like, it just is linked directly to your main ETH address, correct? Do you have any insight there?
Yes, I believe that is correct, but I don't have direct insight, but that sounds correct.
Okay, and multi-sig shouldn't have any impact to that, right?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I knew potentially a dumb question, but I figured it'd be better to not mess up, because I know there was something that was going on with Wintermute and that whole debacle. So just want to kind of confirm in a larger group there. And then I guess another thing that we can hopefully have some larger discussion around, but we did post the Q2 report last week. It's about 80 pages long. I hope everybody had some time to kind of review that and kind of formulate some questions. But we can go into those questions. But I would also love to hear anybody else's general thoughts about it. What would they have liked to have seen added? What would they have liked to see removed? Whether it was just excessive or if there was lack of detail somewhere. Does anybody have any thoughts about future reports and things we should include? Okay. Well, sounds like it is completely perfect, so I appreciate that. And then the other thing that's in kind of the open floor section I wanted to hit on was just the Treasury Charter, and I know I gave a sneak peek of that last week. I know it was embedded, I guess you could say extracts were embedded in our Q2 report, and you can see the link to that there. But really wanted to kind of see, just anybody's general thoughts if they've had some time to digest this, whether they, one, thought it was, in shape to where we can green light it more formally, and then two, just kind of looking at the core functional areas that we want to kind of deploy our capital to, as well as the core principles that are outlined there. Does anybody have any additions, thoughts, comments, or just anything in general about this charter that they would like to kind of see in there?
Hi, this is Danilo. I'm popped in here from Rocket Pool community.
What's up, Danilo?
Hey, just question: does the charter need to be finalized before the liquid stake derivative investments need or will be done? I don't know if those two are related.
No, not related per se. The charter really is not something that's going to be like formal governance per se. It's going to be more of just like a guiding light that we can all work towards. That basically establishes, as I keep saying, like almost like a North Star shared culture vision around what we identify our treasury as. So it's just something for our governance, our SOFONs, which is a committee of our, I guess you could say, different governors, to kind of look at to say, hey, this action or this set of actions does seem like in line with what we hope to accomplish when we take a step back and look at what our North Star is. So this is really kind of broad, high-level commentary or discussion around where we want to go. And
okay.
Then we will, so no impact there, but then we will also have a treasury management framework coming down the lines, but everything that we have in our ETH deployment proposal, especially as it relates to our Rocket Pool investment, should be in line with that treasury management framework. So once it's released, it shouldn't have any retroactive impact, I guess you could say.
Cool. More of a mission statement than prereq. All right.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yep.
And I don't know if this should have been in the prior section, but there's just small news out of Rocket Pool. I don't know if this is the time or place.
Go for it.
So we hit 200,000 our ETH over the weekend, and we hired a community manager who's very well skilled. He's got a couple Medium posts on there, and he's just got onboarded. So, Matt, I meant to tell you that earlier, that he's probably going to be the go-to guy because the devs are just doing dev stuff, and they they hired a community manager to help with the marketing and the communications. So,
well, I appreciate the heads up there. Yeah, feel free to kind of create a group DM with us. I know we're going to be doing some co-marketing around our investment, or at least had initially planned to. So I know I'd touch base with somebody else on the core team. So yeah, if you could just intro to me, that'd be great.
Will do. Thanks, man.
Thanks for stopping by as always, sir. Okay, cool. So yeah, did anybody else have anything that they'd like to say about the Treasury Charter? Again, this is not something that's like totally binding from an explicit standpoint, but something that will kind of act as, I guess you could say, kind of like our Bible that we always kind of go back and gut check, our reaction to whatever we plan on doing.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, this is Cameron from Notional. Happy to be popping in. This is my first Treasury Council call. So yeah, cool to see what you guys are doing here. I took a look before the call at the charter that you guys are talking about, and I guess no real suggestions or anything like that necessarily, but just some commentary that it's pretty cool to see you guys, I guess, and your guys' focus on how you guys are thinking about treasury management. I've spoken with quite a bit of DAOs on how they're thinking about treasury, and as highlighted by the example of the Wonderland and Saifu thing or Sifu thing, I think you guys like are thinking about it in a much more like sustainable way, and that's cool to see. I wish and hope a lot more DAOs kind of are able to follow follow your guys' suit, and I hope you guys like publish and try to make get a little bit of hoopla or some excitement around like I guess this charter, because I think it is kind of unique and a good best practices other DAOs should be adopting as well. So.
Oh, well, thanks for the kind words, and really appreciate you stopping by, sir. I know we've been kind of talking behind the scenes about just our stablecoin deployment, and so I know Teddy with you guys has also stopped by and kind of give his thoughts and kind of show he's a thought leader in the space during one of our panels around just the lending in the DeFi ecosystem in general. So really happy you're here, and that's another thing maybe I can kind of say about what we're doing here is. It's great. Like we're going through all this like rigorous activity to develop these like more formalized, explicit like thought leadership statements and frameworks and everything. And I think that's not what a lot of people are doing. And I think we can kind of take for granted that we're doing it internally, but we can use this as an opportunity to create kind of a marketing effort by kind of becoming thought leaders in the space. Because in the end, my goal with all these different frameworks and charters and whatever it may be is to really take off like the burden from like one person or one human's intuition. It's really it's trying to refocus our energy towards being a collective group of thinking and just making sure that collective group of action and thinking is kind of systematized and kind of embedded in some kind of meaningful framework that we can kind of go back to and compare and contrast against. So really appreciate that, sir, and hopefully you stick around for the stablecoin deployment as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, man.
Any other thoughts on the charter that you see here? Okay, cool. Well, we are flying through today. I guess Starfire. Before we get into the next section, did you have anything that you wanted to say from either the optimism front? I know you have some other proposals you're working on, other things that you're analyzing the landscape that you want to kind of talk about here.
Sure. So we should get the optimism proposal on the forum by the end of the day, which is exciting. It's been a couple weeks in the works, and kind of glad to send that off. I've got two proposals. I just started drafting the Bancor liquidity withdrawal proposal, and then I also have a lower priority, but it's non-core asset proposal management framework for kind of like our Vodium bribes or our convex bribe revenue, and kind of formalizing the parameters on what those the parameters for how those are executed and rebalanced. And then stablecoin deployment, still working on that, just kind of sorting through everything and prioritizing.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, sir, and keep up the good work. I know Starfire has a lot of things on his plate and a lot of things moving in action. So, as always, like everything we do, if you have a passion for something that we're working on or he's working on, feel free to raise your hand and get involved. Kind of along the same lines as we will be posting the Q3 budget request coming up, and so you'll kind of see like what things we're doing from a budget standpoint. And I think that will shed a little bit more light on some of our initiatives coming up as well. So I just want to kind of throw that out there as another open floor item. I'm trying to think of anything else I want to talk about. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, but Sam, do you want to come in and do an intro? I know we've been talking behind the scenes about how we might get you guys involved.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. It's great to meet you. My name's Sam. I been chatting with Matt for the past few weeks. Echo what Cameron was saying earlier around Rook having pretty best in class practices around its treasury and setting a bit of a case study for other DAOs. I come from historically a more traditional investment banking, corporate finance background, but have taken kind of gone down the rabbit hole and started to contribute to a few different DAOs, and think that there is a pretty significant opportunity to just take some of the best practices from corporate America around just like financial transparency and tracking, and bringing them into DAOs. So, for example, I think a lot of DAOs could use kind of just simple budgeting mechanisms around, okay, this is what we spent last month. this is what we're targeting to spend this month between the different subgroups we have, potential on-chain proposals directly to the community, and just having that as a reference point for people to sort of track what the what the sort of treasury runway looks like based on different expenses that could or could not be approved. Then I think even kind of going one layer further, as DAOs look to kind of strategically leverage their treasury, whether that's doing things around, buybacks, whether that's doing different treasury diversification strategies or doing M&A or partnerships. I think that like having a cohesive framework to analyze those decisions, one, from the perspective of, frankly, treasury runway, what does it do to our treasury runway? And then two, just like, what does this do for our token price? And starting to construct valuation models on tokens that look similar to what, equity research puts out for Web2 companies. So, those are some of the areas that I think a little bit of financial rigor could help on, and trying to just kind of do my part to advance the ball there.
Well, thanks for stopping by, Sam, and kind of echo his point. Yeah, there's a lot of people in the space that just kind of take these things for granted and don't really place an emphasis on it. And maybe to kind of layer on, why I've been talking to him, and nothing is set in stone, but a big part of what I see our strategy is, especially as things continue to go down and us being in like a pretty strong financial position, is just trying to look for opportunities as they come up, especially from an mergers and acquisition standpoint, or like a strategic partnership standpoint, and maybe those two things are combined. But before we need to do those, because I'm on the team, I do have a background in M&A. I know how to do the diligence piece, and I'm sure a lot of other people can do components of that. But at some point, if we do kind of go down this path, which I hope we do, given the right circumstances, we will need some other people that are more a little external and have these capabilities to kind of come in and do the financial due diligence, who we don't have to worry about this arm's length relationship. We can have somebody who's independent and unbiased to come in and see if this situation really does warrant further investigation, research, and valuations of some number. So been talking to Sam and his partner about just seeing how we can get them plugged in to help us on that front, as well as just develop more like dynamic models as we grow as a more complex enterprise. I'm so excited to kind of keep the conversation going with Sam and his partner, but just wanted to give everybody a heads up that those conversations are happening, and M&A and strategic investments and partnerships are a big part of what I want to be doing very soon. And
yeah, thanks for the intro, Matt, and echo all that, and stoked to keep getting more involved with the Rook community.
Yeah. And as always, if people have ideas for where they want to see us, place our money from an M&A perspective, from a strategic and partnership standpoint, like let us know. Like these are exactly where community kind of crowdsource the best ideas. And we'll do a lot of research on top of that. Similar to what we're doing with like our ETH deployment, as well as our stablecoin, probably even more so. But again, we're not going to have coverage of the best opportunities. When I say we, that just the actual dedicated Treasury team. I think everybody else is going to have to help with that for us to really maximize our chances of success. So glad you're here, Sam. Hey, does anybody else have anything that's in the open floor section before I kind of move on to the stablecoin deployment? Okay, great. Well, I know you didn't come in ready, Cameron, but I guess, we've been talking. I would love for you to kind of do your pitch about Notional and why you guys might be a good option if you're up to it. And if not, we can always set up a time for a different day.
Yeah, happy to go into things. Cool. Yeah, so I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Notional, but we're a fixed rate lending and borrowing protocol on Ethereum. In structure, we're pretty similar to an Aave or Compound, and in fact, a lot of our system is designed after Compound when we first got started back in like 2020. Our big differentiator, I guess, or one of the big things we like to focus on is that all of the products, or I shouldn't say all the products, we have the ability to lend and borrow at fixed maturities for fixed rates at 3-month, 6-month, and 1-year maturities. So what that means is like, if you lend on Aave or Compound today, you're getting a variable rate, and it makes it hard to predict out what your returns are going to be from that position, as those rates can fluctuate pretty drastically. That being said, they somewhat hover around like 1 to 3%, so to speak, but they can spike and go way down and stuff like that. We've seen them compress across the board, similar to rates on notional even. But anyways, I digress a little bit. But the point is that on notional, you can lock in your rates and your terms. They're fixed. Your positions are also fully liquid. So even though you may lock in for a 1 year maturity at a fixed, like let's call it 5% rate, you can exit that position at any time. You'll just get the pro rata interest that you've accumulated since entering the position. And I think that's kind of like the super quick high level, I guess, on like what notional is. We've seen some other protocols deploy directly into notional, like Yearn most notably in their YDAI and YUSDC pools, deployed about $50 million at the time into notional pools, specifically for some of the same reasons that the Rook Treasury might be interested in deploying into notional, and that is essentially stability in returns. So like dampening the return volatility for YDAI and YUSDC pools. In Rook's case, it would be to know with certainty like what the returns of a particular position are going to be. I think that gives a good primer on things.
Cool, I appreciate that. Could you maybe talk a little bit high level about like the trustlessness level and the decentralization of notional? Just because that's one of our big attributes that we kind of analyze when looking at different protocols where we can get some yield in this situation.
Yeah, of course. So I guess with notional, some of the things, again, like somewhat similar to an Aave or a compound in like our structure. And so everything on notional, when you are lending to notional, you're lending to a pool of capital. There's no counterparty risk from that perspective. So you're not lending directly to an individual or an entity, like you would be on something like Maple, for example. And because of that, there's no counterparty risk, which is really important. Everything is over collateralized. We require or the maximum LTV that a user can take out is around like that 70% number. And so as soon as a collateral drops or in a portfolio collateral drops a certain amount, then that position is up for liquidation. Liquidations can be triggered by anyone. So we've actually been chatting a little bit to see if it would make sense to use Rook in this way, but liquidations are open to anyone. We run bots at Notional Inc., but other community members run liquidation bots as well. As far as like our protocol parameters, from the interest rate anchor interest rates, the collateral factors, all those types of things are all things that can be changed and introduced or canceled or whatever from our governance process. We have a similar governance process to other DAOs out there. Anyone can propose things to the DAO and will go up for community vote and be implemented by the core team. I will say, compared to some other DAOs, we aren't as far along as like as like the end goal in like this path of progressive decentralization, but we're certainly headed there and have implemented a lot of those things to date already. So Matt, I don't know if that was kind of what you're looking for there, if there's anything specifically that you think would be helpful to touch on.
The structure and the level of decentralization, trustlessness, and just the mechanics of protocols, operations to Maple, just because like now that we've seen like when things go wrong, and like the mechanics of how they operate to pool funds, it's really kind of shown a light to like the differences in what you call like DeFi versus like pseudo DeFi. So that was really helpful, I guess, to compare and contrast there. So
that's a super good point, right? Like it's it's funny, we've been banging our drums for a long time on like the difference between DeFi and CeFi and even the Maple guys are great. I think they've built a really great product, and I think they're going to continue to have a lot of success. It is though important to recognize like just the difference, I think, on like what they're offering compared to what we are offering at Notional. Like they are entirely two separate beasts. And for a lot of folks, like that risk profile doesn't make sense. If I guess like how the yield generated and how the redemption process works and what your counterparty risk is and all that kind of stuff, which are all obviously important things to keep in mind, but a lot of people don't necessarily have that knowledge, I guess. And so it's interesting, in the recent, obviously, 1 to 2 months, we've seen a lot of blowups. I think they're going to continue to happen, and it's going to put into light the importance of where is yield coming from, what is a counterparty risk, what is your redemption process, all those types of things. So.
Got it. Really appreciate that. That's super helpful. Yeah, to Cameron's point earlier, we are talking to them a little bit at a high level about, what can we do on the liquidations front, similar to what we're doing with B protocol. Maybe an easier integration here than that. That's a little bit one-off. But, I think that there's probably more to explore there, as well as just is it a good place to kind of park for yield? So we can continue doing that throughout this process. And again, Cameron, really appreciate you stopping by. I think you guys are definitely a very viable option for sure.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Happy to chat with you guys.
Well, I know from a stablecoin productivity standpoint, really we're still in the researching phases of just kind of dividing and conquer the different options that, let me drop this here, that we have on the stablecoin matrix. So just need on our end for the people that have kind of volunteered to contribute, just kind of pushing ahead on doing that research, myself included. But I guess maybe while we have a group, I guess just some things to kind of nail down. I know we asked some fundamental questions last time, but I guess my fundamental question number one is, does anybody have a better feel for what they would like to do from looking at the amount of idle stablecoins we have? What percentage of those should be deployed into these different protocols? For reference, our ETH deployment, we're deploying about 75% of our ETH. My personal opinion with stablecoins is to hold a little bit more close to the chest, just because, again, these are stable assets, and we want to make sure that we have them as we absolutely need to, for whatever that may be. My initial feeling is to do much less than 75%, but maybe since we have a group here, getting a little bit of soft consensus around what other people think about how they've used our stablecoins to gain yield versus just kind of having idle and ready to go. Far, why don't you chime in on your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually just unmuted. My initial thought, and I've said this a couple times, is I think our stables are kind of like our gold, and we should protect it. But of course, gold sitting in the ground, isn't going to do you anything. There's some parable about. Anyway, I think it's better to make them useful, but to make them useful in places where we feel safe with them. So I think, it's researching and just doing basic due diligence on some of the more common household name lending protocols and kind of deciding on how much we want to send out.
Thank you. Anybody else have any strong thoughts on top max allocation percentage? If not, I have another question we can kind of dive into. Okay, well, we'll leave it to the Treasury team then to kind of determine that a little bit better. I guess moving on to, the next question is, I think with this, there's definitely a difference between our ETH deployment, because I think a lot of those liquid staking providers, as I mentioned last week, were, relatively the same from a risk profile standpoint. They had their differences, but, in the end, there was only so material of a difference. So I definitely see there being kind of different angles here. Because Starfire's points, focusing on kind of blue chips, those big names like Compound, Aave, Earn, stuff like that. I think those are obviously something that we can very much include as part of our core low risk bucket. But I just wanted to kind of get if anybody else's thoughts on how they would like to bucket our other investments. When it comes to our stablecoin deployment, I think it's easy just to say low risk, high risk, moderate risk. But before I did that, I just wanted to kind of see if anybody else has any other thoughts on the best way to kind of categorize or bucket these types of investments to diversify not only our yields, but our risk as well.
So I hesitate to speak because I feel I haven't done enough research. But as I learn more about what you guys are doing and that you're looking at transactions that are happening.
Matt, unlike the
I think Aya was speaking. I don't know if you could hear him.
Oh, okay. Sorry, one sec.
Go ahead, Aya.
I don't know how much you're looking at products off ETH mainnet for risk, and think that might be a way to
Aya?
think about.
We're having technical difficulties here.
Can you guys hear me?
Anybody else
Yes
hear
or
him?
no?
I can hear you now, Aya. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear him.
Okay.
Now I can. Okay.
So I was just saying, like, I'm kind of hesitant to speak because I don't feel like I've done the level of research I'd like to, but a category I haven't heard described that to me makes sense as I learn about what you're doing and looking at transactions that are also off of the ETH mainnet is diversifying across chains. So I don't know, like, maybe what the kind of more solid investment things would be on other chains you might be actually doing transactions across, or at least your keepers. If I got that right, even, but I think I'm getting the idea out because I haven't heard any mention about deploying money that didn't seem like it wasn't on ETH mainnet. That's what I was really trying to talk about.
I think it's a really great point to consider. And I definitely think it could be a component of what we do. My thought from a governance and execution perspective really comes down to the fact that, like, for us to do research on a protocol, it's pretty cut and dry to some degree because it's all one of the ones that live on ETH main chain, or even maybe layer 2 because they adopt basically the security mechanisms. But from other chains entirely, I think what we'd have to do is like a fundamental building block perspective is really have, like, similar to what we're doing here, is have a full in-depth research on what we feel is the security models, the likelihood of there being breach, like, or downtime, or just whatever it may be. I think we've seen with other chains, and this is maybe not the best chain to use, but we've seen a lot of downtime with Solana. We've seen protocols on Solana, basically try to seize control of somebody's funds, and so there's those things to be concerned about, and maybe some of those are viable things to happen on main chain as well. We're just not aware of those, but I think before we would do anything meaningful from a asset deployment on another chain perspective, we would probably need to have a very in-depth understanding of the security and our overall strategy on these other chains. But again, I'm very open to it. But does anybody else have any thoughts on this?
I personally don't put a lot or any significant portion of my assets on a different chain. And that's very specific to my own personal kind of risk management strategy. That's not to say that, mainnet stuff haven't had their own share of issues. But I would have to be convinced pretty hard personally to see why we would choose to bridge funds and then deploy them. But yeah, I'm open to hearing whatever.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these other chains aren't battle tested per se, and I think the only reason we would want to be looking at other projects on EVMs, for example, is if we're looking to form some partnership or whatever. For example, let's just say GMX had a lending platform and we wanted to do something with them. Maybe we could use their pools or whatnot and deposit in them as a sign of good faith or somewhat.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think if we have the opportunity to secure additional order flow by, like, integrating with somebody, and to do that, we need to kind of park our assets there. I think that definitely could be very much part of our strategy because, like, it's very mission aligned. But if it's just yield because it's a little bit juicier, I do think that, like, everything needs to be analyzed from a risk reward standpoint, right? And if there's another chain that has higher perceived of security risk for whatever reason, that's obviously going to impact that ratio. But I do think that it's probably a worthwhile effort for us to do. By that I mean really kind of take a step back and say, okay, right now we're kind of in a lull from activity on other chains, but if we do believe that this will be a multi-chain world, which I think that there's maybe disagreements on or support for, we need to do that as well. I think we want to be thought leaders here with regards to our not our crypto philosophy, but from our treasury management philosophy, and just be thought leaders in the space about how we move throughout the ecosystem. And that's different ecosystems. And so, I do think at some point we can maybe, and I don't know if it's strictly in governance or strictly in treasury or what it is, maybe it's a more comprehensive approach, but really take a step back and analyze all these different chains so that way we can position ourselves accordingly if we do feel that one chain is primed for a lot of growth where we want to be. I don't know if anybody else has any resources that one does this already or is familiar and really kind of strong at that, but maybe a good research project for us as a community. But I guess unless otherwise said by anybody who's very passionate about it, I think what we will plan to do from another layer or chain perspective is I think with optimism we see an opportunity to basically get paid to identify what our strategy is there and to position ourselves accordingly. So it's kind of a no-brainer if we can secure those funds. And again, it is part of the Ethereum ecosystem and still adopts its security. So I think that Arbitrum, Optimism are kind of low-hanging fruit, at least initially in my mind. Again, this is not the teams or just the rest of the community, but this is just my own personal opinion. But starting there is probably the best place to go from deploying our assets and just positioning ourselves accordingly. Did that answer your question, Aya?
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, like I'm an idea guy, and not all of them make sense, and especially when I don't feel like I have enough of the groundwork to even pretend to make good suggestions. But ideas come through, and I just, sometimes I want to put them out. Other times I'm like, I'm going to just shut up here.
No one shuts up here. I think again, the best ideas are going to be this one that are crowdsourced, and people that are probably not familiar with us are going to probably come in and have the best ideas because they're thinking outside the box. They're not embedded, especially myself. They're not completely embedded in all things ETH, all things Rook, right? So I encourage everybody to kind of come up and speak their mind, even if they feel it's a stupid idea. Like if they don't feel comfortable doing it in front of the group, just DM me privately. I'm not going to think any differently of it because again, I think some of those are going to be the best suggestions, or the ones that people think are the ones that are the least likely to be viable. But really appreciate it, Aya. Okay, cool. So I guess we were talking about like classification or bucketing of how we deploy our stables. So obviously, I think, in my personal opinion, having kind of a low risk core of just the ultimate blue chips is probably a good approach. And I don't know what percentage that is, and then kind of following that up with more, I guess you could say, moderate risk ones that maybe offer higher yield. And then maybe having a very small percentage allocated towards like high risk, or should I say higher risk investments. Again, hopefully a very small percentage, but ones that we want to either position ourselves from an integration conversation, from maybe it's on layer 2, and just trying to position ourselves from that standpoint, or 3, maybe there's just a yield that we feel is safe enough, but is high enough to where we just kind of have to really kind of grab at that to some degree, as long as it's mission aligned. But probably pretty basic. But again, I think that's just kind of my thought process for how I want to structure this proposal, at least initially. So again, does anybody else have any issues with that or recommendations for how we can improve upon that? Okay.
Solid.
Cool. Let's see. I posted this, I think, with our stablecoin researchers, but I just posted it in the voice chat. I can't remember who posted this, but I saw this somewhere, and it was a really cool post about just like a really deep dive on different stablecoins. And this isn't necessarily at the protocol level, but just stablecoins in general. And I think that's probably a fundamental question we want to ask ourselves longer term: is what stablecoins do we want to kind of even hold a position in? It's easy to say, yeah, let's go with Frax, and we could have said at one point, let's go with UST. But I think understanding which ones we fundamentally can play or cannot play with is probably another good question to ask as part of this proposal process. And so I'm going to be reading this. I'm definitely going to be considering this as part of our research. But really encourage everybody to kind of take a look at this file, because it's a really informative. But okay, I think that was everything I had today. Again, I really appreciate, especially Cameron with Notional. Really appreciate you stopping by. again, they are definitely in the running for some solid allocation, and so we'll kind of see where this goes. But as always, we will be filling out this stablecoin matrix. If you would like to get involved, please let us know. In the next quarter, we will actually have additional incentives for people who are researching and kind of contributing to this process. So more to come on that front. But I guess, again, really appreciate everybody stopping by. And maybe before I leave, does anybody else have any final comments or thoughts or things they'd like to put on the agenda for next week?
I'd love to remind everybody that, KIP 15 has expired, which is the lab's kind of miscellaneous use budget. There's a report on that in the quarterly report. TLDR, we did not spend all of the last quarter's budget by a lot. So we have a lot of leftover. We are in the very final stages of putting together that Q3 labs budget. And Matt, did you already talk about this at the beginning of the call? Am I double speaking here?
I think I just briefly alluded to it, but I think it's a really good point. Yeah, so the TLDR of our last budget request, we spent like a third of what our Rook was allocated, less than a third. So we have a very large surplus of Rook. I would say we spent less than half of what our USDC allocation or budget was. So it's been really disciplined spending all around. I really haven't seen any situations where I'm like, well, that was just really reckless spending. So I think it's been really good to watch this unfold. I think that budget process was, pretty solid, but I think we're going to even be formalizing even more. I know Jason has come up with a template that I've been working off of. I now have it in basically all the directors' hands for review and additional commentary. So hopefully this should be kind of being posted to the forum somewhat soon for everybody to kind of have their eyes on and so have some really meaningful discussion around. Because again, we're not just trying to grab at money for the sake of grabbing money. We want it to be we want it to be disciplined, we want it to be systematic, and we want to have community buy-in for how our allocation of resources tie in with what our strategic initiatives are. So more to come on that front, and really hope to have everybody's eyes and voice on that.
Yeah, my plan for this quarter, my section is technically called kind of growth and operations, but in it is community initiatives as well. And so I plan to kind of be building some more kind of engaging, exciting, entertaining aspects within our community, making sure that folks are, here, happily contributing. And I think that some of the stuff we'll, be talking about over the next quarter will hopefully bring, a little bit extra kind of, value to folks outside of, getting to contribute in the DAO and, staying updated and being a token holder and participating in governance. Outside of that, we really want to make sure we invest in the actual community themselves as well. So.
Absolutely. Appreciate that, Deeds. Jason, anything from your end from a house cleaning perspective that you want to say that's more kind of treasury related?
No, I think we've talked about it all with this budget. That's kind of the focus right now.
Okay, great. And I guess maybe one last thing before I let everybody go. Just talking about high level about some proposals coming down the line. And I know we've referred to some of them, but Optimism proposal will be hopefully getting shipped today. We have an other assets discretionary KIP that will be posted hopefully in the next week or two. I know I will be looking to establishing a testing wallet, as well as just really kind of defining which stable coins that we can kind of swap between and actually own. And then I'm sure I'm forgetting others. The Bancorp proposal is coming down the line as well. Starfire, am I missing anything from a treasury perspective?
I think you got it all. And that Bancorp proposal, hopefully, Jason, I can get that to you guys just to have you guys kind of look over it by tomorrow afternoon.
Sounds good.
Well, I really appreciate the time today, everybody. And again, go to a governance workshop at 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. I believe it's still then. And really excited to kind of keep things moving forward. And really, again, appreciate you guys being here. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.